Hi everyone, and welcome back to the garden for the second part of my design series. I think there's only going to be 2 videos in this. I may do a third one, but it will probably be closer to the time when I'm actually starting to put stuff in the ground, and a little more discussion there. It's the end of the day. I just got home from work, and our weather is, of course, being weird as usual in Ohio, and it has been almost 60 degrees today. These temperatures are obviously unusual for our area, although it's not unheard of. A couple years ago in 2020, I think it was 2020, yeah, 2020, January 10th, I believe it was. Don't ask me why I remember the date, because I'm really kind of odd about dates like that, but I planted these hydrangea standards on each side of the patio, and I remember it so well because the patio had just been finished for the most part, and it was the first plants I planted around the patio. So I have planted things in January and they survive just fine and have done really well. As long as the ground's diggable. Of course, you don't want to put something in the ground that just came from a greenhouse that's really green directly out into the yard and it's going to be, below freezing the next day. Those are not good things to do. But for something that was already dormant, because I got those from the garden center dormant, they were outside in their high tunnels in dormant storage, and they actually had to dig them out for me as I went looking for them. You can certainly plant dormant plants this time, and it's a great time. Allow them to root in earlier in the spring for a much happier summer. But because the temperatures have been so warm, we're getting some bulbs starting to push, which is pretty typical about this time. We're halfway through January, so they'll start pushing some growth now. Of course, we probably won't have a whole lot of blooms until the March time frame. A lot of what I'm seeing are daffodils, although I did notice a little bit of tulip foliage, just tiny little tips of them out front. I don't have a whole lot of tulips in my garden. And then we have some snowdrops that are also going to be coming up, and those do typically bloom much earlier than the tulips. And so they'll be blooming anytime soon, hopefully. They'll poke out of the ground, and then lots of the other stuff that we got going on when we planted this fall. So let's go up front and discuss the area of the garden that I'm going to be also renovating this summer, where the blue spruce was. So in the last video, you saw this section in part 1 where I'm going to be adding some macrophylla hydrangeas. And the other side of the house, the other corner of the house, is where we're going to be doing some other remodeling. So this is the area of the home that we're going to be doing some renovations on. This container right here will go in front of the window that I mentioned in the last video. And so this whole area is open. And so the varieties that are going to be in this spot, I'll discuss a little more. We've got some of the daffodils that I planted right here, foliage coming up. Real tiny stuff this year. That actually might be alliums, I believe. I think I planted a variety of alliums right here in this spot. But this area is going to have a little more perennial design in it. I recently redid this bed this fall. If you're new to the channel, you can check out those videos about how I did that. But this is going to be the second focus in the spring. This might actually be it probably won't be I'll probably design the other side of the bed first. I'm going to be doing them at the same time. It's not going to take a lot of time. I'll have the plants come in about the same time. I can pick them up at the garden center. I'm going to be planting a lot of the evergreens before we have our last frost, just to get them settled in for summer. And then we're going to have all of this space, which doesn't maybe look so big on video, or maybe it does because of the wide angle lens, but it's a good 14-foot circle here. And then we have this extra probably 10 feet here to work with as well. So lots of fun things coming. Now let's go take a look inside and see what I'm going to be doing. It's getting a little chilly out here now that the sun is setting. But I've enjoyed the warmer temperatures, even though it has created a soggy mess with all the rain we've got. The garden is just really wet right now. All right, y'all, it's a couple days later. I was a little tired from the other day, and so today we're going to be talking about redesigning the bed I just showed you. And this is probably one of my most favorite projects for the year. And I think the reason for that is because the primary centerpiece of this bed is going to be a Bracken's brown southern magnolia. And so I like to add plants to my garden that sometimes inspire a southern interest. Bracken's brown, which I introduced in the fall in October, I believe, is a magnolia that does pretty well in our area in southwest Ohio. You see them more often in the Cincinnati area. We are a little north of there, and I think it will do really well. I've seen some magnolias around here. I don't know the specific variety. There's also one called 𝗍𝗑𝗏𝗏. And so the garden center I'm getting these from in the spring, or just in 2 months really, the middle of March, Grandma's Gardens is going to be carrying both Bracken's Brown Beauty and 𝗍𝗑𝗏𝗏 in the spring. My understanding from speaking with the garden center is that 𝗍𝗑𝗏𝗏 is going to come in and it's going to be a little bigger, but from my own research, 𝗍𝗑𝗏𝗏𝗏 grows bigger than Bracken's Brown potentially, and so while I want something there that stays relatively compact, the best variety I think for that spot is going to be Bracken's Brown. So magnolias obviously are evergreen. Even up here in Ohio, unless we had really bad temperatures, it could potentially defoliate or partially defoliate in winter, but the garden center said they've not seen that a whole lot up here. So I'm really excited about this specific variety. It's the only two that I know that are hardy up here. The weather right here just south of I-70 tends to be a little warmer than it is north of I-70. So let me put a picture up on the screen of kind of how I've designed this bed so far. This is a very rough sketch in Photoshop like I showed you in the last design video that I did. But in the center there you can see the Bracken's Brown Beauty. That is obviously a very early tree. That's a nice one that I could find online to kind of feel the impact of how this is going to look in that space. But it'll eventually grow up and be a little wider. Now, magnolias can be pruned, so they're an evergreen, but they can be pruned on, unlike a needle evergreen would be. So that's a good aspect of this tree in this location. I'm going to be bumping it up, I think, a little bit from where the spruce is. So you can see in the picture there where the magnolia is spaced in the bed. The spruce was back probably 3 or 4 feet. Going to move it up a little bit, I think, at the recommendation of the garden center when I had them come out here and look at the space to provide recommendations in the fall. And so if you have a garden center that will come out and survey your property, usually some of them offer some type of design services, some bigger garden centers, so have them come out. Sometimes they provide those services for free if you're purchasing a lot of the plant material from them. But in my case, he just happened to be in the area and we've got to know each other, and he stopped by and looked at both areas and provided some recommendations there. So in this picture, I'm going to show you 2 potential designs. And this one right here that you see surrounding the magnolia are Fire Chief Arborvitae. And so you know I added a few of those if you've been following along in the fall to my garden. Fire Chief is one of those Arborvitae that I was never really into. And then last year I kind of started focusing on some more evergreen interest in my garden. And I decided, yeah, I really like that one after seeing it in person. I think I'd seen it a lot online, and online it just doesn't give the same effect as if you've seen them in person. They're really kind of a delicate textured evergreen. Now, because the Bracken's Brown Beauty is an evergreen, I can potentially go a different direction than the Arborvitae surrounding it. And one of them I have considered is this other shrub by First Edition Shrubs called Matcha Ball Ashleaf Spirea. And so it is similarly sized. It gets 3 to 4 foot wide and 2 to 3 foot tall. And it just has this really interesting color to it. So it's not an evergreen, but it has a nice ferny texture to it, and it's also not very green. It's more yellow and orange on its new growth specifically, and so it's very similarly colored to the Fire Chief Arborvitae, but it won't be evergreen in nature. And so I'm considering those. I know I can get those locally as well. I've seen them. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to them previously, but as I was doing this design video, I was seeking out all sorts of evergreens I could add to the area. And then I just happened to stumble upon this one when I was looking at all the shrubs available in that location. So that location of the house is kind of southeast facing, and so it's going to get a lot of sun all day. And now that the bed is opened up a little more, I have some hosta and ferns planted there currently that I'm going to need to transplant somewhere else in the garden that were provided a lot of shade from the spruce that was there, the blue spruce. And so this bed, as I mentioned earlier in the video, in the walkabout video, is going to get a lot more redesign in front of this space as well, but I've not captured that in the images I've showed you because that's kind of a place that's going to flow a little bit. I'm thinking about getting some topiary boxwoods and do like a 3-tiered approach a bigger topiary single ball and then a smaller one and then even a smaller one, so we have a set of 3 that's just kind of floating there, and maybe underplant them with lots of perennials. So the perennials in this bed I've kind of carefully thought out of what I'm going to put here. And so you'll notice that I have some more alliums. Those alliums are new alliums introduced by Walter's Gardens, where all the Proven Winners perennials come from. But Proven Winners did not pick up this allium to add to their collection. I know you can purchase these alliums online. I was looking earlier today, and so I have some place to order to come in, and they are going to be really interesting. So I saw these at Cultivate last summer, and they're interesting because although they're an allium, they're shaped more like an allium that you would grow from a bulb. They have up to 3-inch flower seed heads on them, and you typically don't see those in like perennial type alliums. And so they may, in this image that I showed you, appear a little smaller than they're actually going to grow. They can get at 2.5 foot tall, but I think they will be a beautiful texture. You know, I love alliums. I have them all over my garden. They're great plants to add to your garden because they're usually deer and rabbit resistant, but they also provide a nice grass texture when they're not in bloom. And in a lot of cases, their seed heads will last through winter, giving you some additional interest as well. So if you're not into alliums, some people are not. They do have an oniony smell, but you can't really smell it unless you're going to go up there and like trim on them or something like that. But I really enjoy them in the garden, and they're really beautiful. I wished I had a picture from Cultivate that I took of them that I could show you. I was just in love with them as soon as I saw them in Walter's Gardens booth, and I didn't take a picture, but I'll show you some pictures that I pulled from online for that one specifically. Surrounding the alliums there, you can see that there's an Astilbe called Dark Side of the Moon by Proven Winners. I saw this one at Cultivate in 2022 as well, but I actually placed the order from these from Walter's Gardens in 2021, probably December, November 2021. It was a newly announced Astilbe. I had never seen a black Astilbe at the time, so it's a really dark purple color, but I'll show you the picture I took at Cultivate inside. It's so dark that it is pretty much black. And then it has pink, purpley seed heads in the spring, or flowers in the spring that tend to attract a lot of pollinators. Now this is an Astilbe that they say can take full sun. I do have little visions in pink. I've showed you some pictures of it as throughout this YouTube journey, and on my Instagram I'll show some more photos on the screen now of little visions in pink. I really recommend that variety. I know a lot of people do not have luck with Astilbe, and I'm not sure why. And it might be because you're providing them not good enough lighting conditions. My first introduction to Astilbe was I purchased some online in 2019 or 2018, kind of when I really got into gardening. And those are still planted out here under one of my trees, but they have never grown really well. You can't even really tell they're there. The Visions series does really well for me, and specifically Little Visions in pink has done really well. They get probably a good amount more sun than you would think they would get, so they thrive in kind of the same location that I've been growing petunias in front on my hay racks before. So if you have Astilbe and they're not doing too great, try and give them a little more sun and they might perform better for you. In my case, these are going to be getting a lot of sun. I'm not sure if they will burn their first year, but since Walter says that they can take full sun, I'm going to put them through the paces and they'll definitely get full sun. Now they'll be protected from hot afternoon sun, that really damaging, scorching sun that we can get in summer. So that will provide them some reprieve in that time of the day, but they'll get lots of good morning sun. I think they will mix really lovely with the alliums here. And I'm going to be adding probably a lot of annuals in this location, like I mentioned in my first design video. So when I get the Bracken's brown Magnolia, it's obviously going to be smaller than that in the picture, but because it's going to eventually grow wider, I'm going to have to leave some space between the Bracken's brown and the Arborvitae or the Matcha ball shrubs that I put there. Between that space, I'm going to add a lot of the annuals. This is a location where I'm thinking about throwing in some of those annual salvias that I picked up, some of the blue, rockin' blue suede shoes, and they will kind of grow up, I think, behind whatever shrubs I picked there, because the shrubs that I get will still be pretty small. And so that way we'll have a nice layer from front to back all the way around the Magnolia. I'm also probably this fall going to plant some more daffodils in this space. because the Astilbes will come up and bloom early spring, and then their seed heads will remain, but the alliums aren't going to bloom until probably July, mid to late summer, and so there'll be kind of a lull there. So I'm going to need some bloom interest in this bed between when the Astilbes bloom and when the alliums bloom. There may be some other perennials I stick in this spot. Right now I just have a pairing of those two because those are the two I have on the way. But we'll see what else I find that might look interesting in this spot. Walters also has this interesting perennial coming out called Artemisia silver lining, and it's a perennial Artemisia, but it stays relatively smaller. I know you can buy a lot of those like silver mound, and you'll plant them, and they're small in their container, but by the end of the summer they're 2 and 3 foot wide and just these massive, almost shrub-like things. And so I don't have the space for those in this location. But silver lining's not coming out. Don't think I'll be able to get it until 2024. So I may leave some space in there till I can plant some of those next year, or if I see something locally at the garden centers, I can add in here. One thing I am getting in that I think will actually look really good in this space, although I've only got 6 of them, is a 𝗗𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗦 called Lemon Zest. This is one I saw at Cultivate 2022 as well. And I don't think it'll be really difficult to find this year, I think. So I placed an order online at Wayside Gardens, and right now they have them at $26 a piece. So I got a few of those that I'm going to intersperse in. Lemon Zest is really interesting because it's this variegated 𝗗𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗦, but it's really lemony colored with a stripe of white through it. 𝗗𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗦 is one of those great perennials that you can add to your garden that add a lot of breezy texture to it. I already have a lot in this bed that I added in the fall, and that was the Areola variety. It's a variegated color as well. But I think combining this Lemon Zest with the Dark Side of the Moon Astilbe, which is black, and the purple blooms and texture from the alliums will just be a really wonderful texture. So maybe I can poke, I think I only got 6 of these, so maybe I can poke a few of those around in there, or I can potentially divide them. We'll see how big those are when they come in. This is the first year that 𝗗𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗦 Lemon Zest is going to be available, so I don't know how many they will have if you're looking at ordering any from Wayside. Wayside's the only location online I've been able to find them. I talked to Great Garden Plants to see if they would be getting them in, but the minimum orders from the nursery that developed this plant was so high that I think it's going to be hard to find this year. So if you really like this plant, go ahead and place your order now and it will come in the spring. And that is about it for this bed right now. I'm sure I'll be adding, like I said, some annuals, all of those annuals. If you haven't watched the video of all the annuals I'm getting in, there's about 450 of them. So they'll be filling spaces around all of these perennials because they will come in, for the most part, I think they're coming bare root, and so there won't be a whole lot to show you when they come in, although I'll walk you through that process as I'm planting them. So I'm going to need some areas or annuals to fill space. And then in front of this bed, you can see in this photo, I think there is the container there, the concrete container that's getting moved out of this bed and into another bed. And so I'll have more space available right there to plant as well. I have a rose in this bed called Desdemona I'm going to be moving out. I kind of want these beds to have a natural step down flow from tallest to lowest, and so some of the shrubs that I have in there now are going to interfere with that design aspect, and I'm going to have to move them somewhere else in the garden or give them away to some friends. But I'm super excited about how this bed is turning out so far, and I'm really ready to get these beds started come March, April. If you have any comments on whether I should add the Fire Chief Arborvitae or whether I should go with the Matcha Ball False Leaf Spirea, let me know. The only reason I'm trying to decide between those two plants is because I already have an evergreen structure in that space, because I'm already going to incorporate some of those boxwood topiaries, I think, in this location, as well as some other evergreens. So some foundational plantings of evergreens around this Bracken's brown may not be necessary. Thank you guys for joining me, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Bye.